welcome back again to Telltale Books. Got kind of a different video this time. In the early days of the pulp magazines, the first of the fantastical genre magazines to be published in the United States was Weird Tales magazine. And of course, Weird Tales is very famous as the magazine that published H.P. Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard, Clark Ashton Smith, and a whole group of authors that through Weird Tales got to know one another and got to be friendly with one another, including people like August Derleth and Henry Kuttner. Robert Bloch was part of that group, and one of them that was very friendly with Lovecraft was Frank Belknap Long. Now, he's somebody that I haven't read much. I've only read, I think, one short story of his previously. Because I focused on science fiction, and he did write a lot of science fiction, but mostly not stuff that was reprinted in the 70s and 80s. It's mostly very old. Now, of course, it's all easy to find in PDFs of all those old magazines, but coming across books of Frank Belknap Long's work was a little tricky when I was young. But these days there's the internet, and you can find everything that was almost everything that was ever printed out there. Sometimes you got to pay the price, but most of the time you can get it pretty reasonable. And this happens to be one. This isn't fiction of his. It's a book of poetry that he wrote, and most of them were published in Weird Tales. This book, In Mayan Splendor, was published by Arkham House here in Wisconsin, Sauk City, in 1977. And it's just a tiny little book, very short, 66 pages, and the pages are just these very little poems. So this was an extremely quick read. Now, I've previously read a lot of the poetry of H.P. Lovecraft. I've got his book of complete poems. I'm not all the way through it yet, but I've read a lot of it, enough of it to realize that I love Lovecraft's fiction. I really don't like his poetry. I've come across a couple that I liked. One that I really liked, but most of his poetry is just... it's either boring, or it's racist, or it's relating to local politics in Providence, Rhode Island. And it's just not very interesting, And it isn't like his fiction. It isn't, most of it is not very fantastical like his fiction was. That's not the case with these poems by Frank Belknap Long. They're fantastical. Some of them are horror. Others are more like fantasy, like past ages and, lost world type poems. And, gods and stuff like that. But they're all pretty good, and they're all enjoyable. I didn't come across anything that I would call a top tale. But overall, it's an enjoyable book, and you can pick this up online pretty cheap. I mean, a lot of Arkham House books are selling for $300 or more, because Arkham House went out of business, of course, and hasn't printed in a lot of years. And even though this was done in 1977, and they did a lot of books about that time, a lot of their books are highly sought after by collectors, but apparently not this one. I got it pretty cheap, and it's a nice book. So, In Mayan Splendor, a collectible book that you can pick up inexpensive with some really excellent Weird Tales poetry. I would love to be able to read some of these poems, but having been printed in 1977, and Long, he did live, I forget when he passed away, but not He lived to an old age. Let's look it up here. The exact date of his death, I forget what it is. Okay, he died in 1994, so he died not that long ago. So this poetry is most likely still under copyright, and so I can't legally read it to you. I would love to, though. Some of it is really nicely written and poetic. So, In Mayan Splendor is an excellent little book if you're looking for something beyond just H.P. Lovecraft's fiction and want to try some weird tales poetry, but don't want to read H.P. Lovecraft's poetry because it's so racist. I don't recall anything racist in Long's poetry. I didn't come across anything that anybody would take issue with in there. So it's a safe bet. You can enjoy it. Now, like I say, not all the poems, but the vast majority of the poems were written and published back in the 1930s. So it's that authentic weird tales flavor. And that's all I got with this one. It's enjoyable. Not great, but it's definitely very good. If you can come across a copy and like that sort of thing, I think you'll like reading it. And amazingly, I am not going to start a project to read everything that Frank Belknap Long wrote. I'm skipping him. But, well, have you read anything else by Long, or have you read In Mayan Splendor? Leave your comments. Like us and subscribe to us. Come on back for more of these videos. I'll be here. And I'll see you when you come back.